I didn't notice him at first because the camera alert came in half a second too late. I was about 3 hours into my shift, somewhere around 1:17 a.m., the kind of time when the highway goes quiet in waves and the fluorescent lights inside the store start to feel louder than they should. The gas station sat just off a 2-lane stretch outside Dayton, nothing but trees and a long dark shoulder on both sides of the road. Most nights, I'd get maybe one car every 20 minutes, usually truckers or people too tired to drive straight through. I was used to the silence. I was used to watching the security monitors more out of boredom than anything else. That night felt exactly like every other shift at first. I was behind the counter, leaning on my elbows, scrolling through my phone with one eye on the register and the other on the camera feed mounted above the cigarette display. There were 6 camera angles cycling through, 2 inside, 4 outside covering the pumps and parking lot. When the system detects motion, it sends a small alert to the corner of the screen and auto-switches to the relevant camera. It's usually nothing. A moth flying too close to the lens. A piece of trash rolling across the concrete. Sometimes headlights passing by trigger it if they hit just right. So when the alert popped up, motion detected, pump 3, I didn't even look up right away. I finished typing out a message, hit send, then glanced at the screen. The camera had already switched. Pump 3 was empty. The concrete pad was clear, the trash can lid was still, the overhead light humming like always. I watched it for maybe 3 seconds, waiting for something else to move. Nothing did. I shrugged it off, assuming it was a bug or maybe a passing car's light. But then I noticed something small. The timestamp in the corner had already advanced. It wasn't live anymore. It was showing the few seconds after the motion had been detected. I tapped the playback button and scrubbed back just a bit. There was a single frame, just one, where something dark passed along the very edge of the camera's range. Not enough to make out a shape. Just a shift. Like someone had been there and stepped out of view right before the system caught up. I paused it. Leaned closer to the screen. It could have been anything. A shadow. A trick of the light. I told myself that and let the feed return to live view. The rest of the lot looked normal. No cars pulling in. No one walking up. I checked the front windows out of habit, looking through the glass toward pump 3. Same empty concrete. Same quiet road. I went back to my phone. Maybe 2 minutes later, the alert went off again. Same camera. Same pump. This time I looked immediately. And again, nothing. Just the empty lot, lit in that washed-out yellow from the overhead fixtures. I felt that small flicker of annoyance you get when something keeps interrupting you for no reason. I replayed the clip. Same thing. A slight movement right at the edge. Gone before it fully registered. I sat there a little longer that time, watching the live feed, expecting maybe a person to step back into frame or a car to pull up. Nothing happened. The highway stayed empty. No headlights, no engine noise, nothing but the low hum of the building and the occasional tick from the refrigeration units behind me. I stood up and walked a few steps toward the front windows, squinting out into the darkness beyond the pumps. The glass reflected more of the inside than the outside, so I leaned to the side to cut the glare. Still nothing. If someone had been out there, they were gone. Or they were standing somewhere I couldn't see. I went back to the counter, but I didn't pick my phone up right away this time. I kept watching the monitors. There's a kind of pattern you get used to when you stare at those screens long enough. You start to recognize what normal looks like. The way shadows sit. The way the lights flicker. The way the empty space feels. And that night, something about that one corner, the edge of the pump 3 camera, felt off. Like it was just slightly out of sync with everything else. The next alert came faster. Maybe 30 seconds later. Same notification. Same camera. This time, I didn't bother replaying it right away. I just stared at the live feed, waiting. A few seconds passed. Nothing. Then I scrubbed back. Again, that same partial movement. Just enough to tell me it wasn't random. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a glitch repeating the same frame. It was different each time. Subtle, but different. Like someone moving just out of sight. I felt my shoulders tense without really thinking about it. I glanced up at the convex mirror in the corner of the ceiling, the one that lets you see behind the aisles. Empty. I looked back at the front door. Locked. The deadbolt was still turned, just like I'd set it at the start of my shift. I checked the time again. 1:24 a.m. It was too early for the early morning rush, too late for most traffic. If someone was out there, they weren't a customer. Another alert. This time I caught the transition in real time. The screen flicked from the main view to the Pump 3 camera. For a split second, less than a blink, I thought I saw a shape at the very edge. Then it was gone. The frame settled into stillness again. I didn't replay it right away. I just watched, holding my breath a little without realizing it. The longer I stared, the more that empty space started to feel occupied. Like there was something just beyond what the camera could show me. I finally reached out and rewound the clip. Slowed it down. Frame by frame. And there it was. Not clear. Not enough to describe. But definitely there. A shoulder, maybe. Or the side of a jacket. Dark against the light. Moving with purpose, not drifting. Not random. I leaned back slowly, eyes still on the screen. The system chimed again, another motion alert stacking on top of the others. Same spot. Same delay. That was when it hit me that it wasn't just that someone was out there. It was that they were always just barely out of view. Every single time the camera caught movement, it was already too late. Like whoever it was knew exactly where the edge of the frame ended, and stayed just beyond it. I did not look away from the monitor this time. I stayed there, standing behind the counter with both hands pressed flat against the surface, watching that same corner of the screen like something might step into view if I stared long enough. The alert sound felt louder now, sharper, like it was cutting through the quiet instead of blending into it. Another notification appeared. Motion detected at Pump 3. I did not even blink. The camera switched, and again, the space was empty. But now I knew what to look for. I reached over and dragged the playback bar back just a second. There it was again. That same edge movement. Slightly different angle this time. Slightly lower, like whoever it was had shifted their stance. It was not random. It was not a glitch repeating the same image. It was changing. I felt something settle in my chest, not panic exactly, but a kind of tight awareness. I stepped away from the counter and moved closer to the front windows again, slower this time, like I did not want to draw attention to myself even though I knew that did not make sense. The glass reflected my own outline back at me, pale under the overhead lights. I leaned to the side and tried to see beyond it. Pump 3 sat about 20 feet from the door, just inside the main wash of the exterior lights. Beyond that, the darkness thickened quickly, the tree line swallowing everything past the edge of the lot. If someone was standing just outside the camera range, they could be right there in that shadow line. Close enough to see me. Close enough to hear if I opened the door. I swallowed and stepped back from the glass. My eyes flicked up to the monitors again. Another alert. Same camera. Same delay. I watched it switch over. Empty. I rewound. This time, I slowed it down even more, frame by frame. The shape lingered just a fraction longer than before. Not enough to identify, but enough to confirm it was a person. It had the rhythm of a person moving. Not drifting. Not flickering. A deliberate step. In, then out. Like they were testing the boundary. I checked the other cameras. Pump 1, clear. Pump 2, clear. Pump 4, clear. The back lot camera showed nothing but the dumpster and the faint outline of the delivery area. No cars pulling in from any angle. No headlights approaching. If someone was out there, they had either walked in from the road or had been there long enough that I never saw them arrive. That thought sat heavier than the rest. Because I had been watching the cameras on and off all night. I should have seen someone pull in. I should have heard a car door, or at least caught a glimpse of movement before the alert started. But there had been nothing until that first delayed notification. I turned my attention to the system log in the corner of the screen, the small list that timestamps every motion event. The entries were stacking up now, each one tied to the same camera, each one only a minute or less apart. I scrolled back. The first alert had come in at 1:17 a.m. The next at 1:19. Then 1:20. Then 1:22. The gaps were getting shorter. I leaned closer, scanning the times. And then I noticed something else. The alert times did not match when I remembered looking up. They were earlier. By a few seconds each time. Which meant the system had detected the movement before I even reacted to it. Which meant whoever was out there had already moved before I realized anything was happening. I felt that tightness in my chest shift into something colder. I straightened up and looked around the store again, like I needed to confirm I was still alone inside. The aisles were empty. The refrigerators hummed steadily. The coffee machine light blinked in its usual slow pattern. Everything inside was normal. Too normal. I went back to the monitor and forced myself to watch all 4 exterior feeds at once instead of letting the system auto-switch. I wanted to catch it live. I wanted to see where exactly that movement was coming from. The minutes dragged in a way that made it hard to tell how much time had actually passed. Then the alert sound hit again. This time, I did not look at the highlighted feed right away. I kept my eyes moving across all 4 screens. Pump 1, nothing. Pump 2, nothing. Pump 4, nothing. And then, at the very edge of the Pump 3 feed, I saw it. Just for a fraction of a second. A darker shape against the already dim background. It moved sideways, not toward the store, not away from it, but along that invisible line where the camera stopped seeing clearly. It was controlled. Careful. Like they knew exactly how far they could go before being fully visible. I immediately scrubbed back. Slowed it down again. This time I caught a little more. The outline of an arm. The bend of an elbow. It looked like they were leaning in just enough to trigger the motion sensor, then stepping back out again. My mouth felt dry. I glanced toward the door without meaning to, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the glass was still empty. Locked. Silent. I turned back to the screen. Another alert was already queued. It was happening faster now. Almost like they were getting more confident. Or more deliberate. I hovered over the playback, my finger hesitating for a moment before dragging it back again. The same motion. In. Out. Always just out of reach. I realized then that it was not just that they were avoiding being seen. It was that they were making sure I knew they were there. The alerts were not random. They were consistent. Repeated. Like a signal. I looked at the timestamp again. 1:31 a.m. The night still had hours left in it. And whatever was standing out there had already figured out exactly how my cameras worked. I stayed where I was, eyes locked on that one corner of the screen, waiting for the next alert, because at that point I was no longer watching out of curiosity. I was waiting for it to happen again. I stopped trusting the camera after that. Not completely, but enough that I started checking everything twice. The next alert came less than 20 seconds later, and instead of immediately replaying it, I turned my head and looked straight out through the front glass first. The reflection of the store light still made it hard to see, so I moved closer, almost pressing my shoulder against the window to get a better angle past the glare. The lot looked empty again. Pump 3 sat there under the humming light, no movement, no shape, nothing standing where the camera said something had just been. Then I looked back at the monitor and rewound the clip. Same motion. Same edge. In and out. I felt that same cold awareness tighten again, but this time there was something else under it. Frustration. Because I knew I was being shown something on the screen, but I could not line it up with what I could see in real life. It was like the camera and my own eyes were always half a second out of sync. I stayed there for a while, moving between the glass and the monitor, trying to catch it at the exact right moment. The alerts kept coming, stacking closer together now, sometimes only 10 seconds apart. Each time, I would check the screen, then the window, then back again. And every time, I missed it by just enough. At some point, the bell above the door chimed, and I flinched hard enough that my hand slipped off the counter. I turned immediately. A truck driver stepped inside, the kind you see all the time on that route, mid-40s maybe, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He paused just inside the door, looking at me for a second longer than normal, like he had noticed the way I reacted. "You good?" he asked, his voice flat but not unfriendly. I nodded too quickly and stepped back behind the register. "Yeah. Sorry. Just tired." He gave a small shrug and walked past me toward the refrigerators, the glass doors rattling slightly as he opened one. I forced myself to focus on something normal, watching him grab a bottle and set it on the counter. The routine of ringing someone up felt grounding in a way I did not expect. I scanned the drink, told him the total, took his card, all of it automatic. But even while I was doing that, my eyes kept drifting back up to the monitor. Another alert had come in. Same camera. Same corner. I hesitated for just a second before looking. When I did, the feed had already switched. Empty. I did not replay it right away. I waited until the truck driver picked up his bottle and turned to leave. He paused at the door, glancing out toward the pumps like he was checking something. Then he looked back at me. "You got someone out there?" he asked. The question landed heavier than I expected. "No," I said, a little too fast. "Why?" He pushed the door open halfway, still holding it with one hand. "Thought I saw someone by that pump. The one on the end." He nodded toward pump 3 without knowing the number. My eyes flicked to the monitor again, then back to him. "Probably just a shadow," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He did not argue, but he did not look convinced either. He stepped outside, letting the door close behind him with a soft click. I watched him through the glass as he walked toward his truck, which was parked off to the side of the lot. As he moved, he turned his head once, looking toward the area near pump 3 again. Then he got in, started the engine, and pulled out onto the road. His headlights swept across the pumps as he left, briefly lighting up the entire area. For that 1 second, everything was fully visible. Concrete. Pumps. Trash cans. No one standing there. Then the light passed, and the lot dropped back into that uneven glow from the overhead fixtures. I exhaled slowly, realizing I had been holding my breath. The moment the truck disappeared down the road, another alert chimed. Louder this time, or maybe it just felt that way because of how quiet everything had become again. I did not move right away. I kept my eyes on the door, on the reflection in the glass, on the space just beyond it. Then I turned back to the monitor and scrubbed the footage. The shape was there again. But this time, it lingered just a fraction longer. Enough that I could see it was facing toward the store. Not walking past. Not turning away. Just there, angled toward me, then stepping back out of view. My stomach tightened. I glanced back at the front windows again, slower now, more careful. The reflection showed me my own outline, the counter behind me, the shelves. But beyond that, in the darker part of the glass, I thought I saw something shift. I leaned slightly to the side to change the angle. It was gone. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. The hum of the lights. The faint buzz from the sign outside. No footsteps. No voices. Nothing that matched what the camera was picking up. I went back to the monitor and pulled up the system log again. The alerts were coming faster now, almost every few seconds. I watched the timestamps tick forward, each one tied to that same spot. And then I noticed something I had missed before. The alerts were not perfectly regular. There was a pattern, but it was uneven, like someone was adjusting their timing. Moving in, waiting, then moving again. Testing how quickly the system would respond. I leaned closer, eyes scanning the screen. That was when the next alert hit, and this time, I caught something different. As the feed switched, there was a brief reflection in the glass of the pump housing. Not clear. Not a full image. But enough to suggest a face. Or at least the shape of a head turned toward the camera. I froze, staring at that single frame. Then it was gone, replaced by the same empty scene. I did not rewind immediately. I just stood there, staring at the live feed, feeling that cold awareness settle deeper. Because now it was not just that someone was out there. It was that they had been close enough, and positioned just right, to almost be seen. And they were still choosing not to be. I stopped trying to line up the camera with what I could see and started paying attention to the space itself. The longer I stood there, the more I realized that the problem was not just the camera delay. It was the layout. The way the light from the overhead fixtures hit the pumps left a narrow strip along the outer edge where the brightness dropped off just enough to hide detail. Not full darkness, but not clear either. A kind of in-between space where movement could exist without fully resolving into shape. I had never noticed it before because there had never been a reason to look that closely. Now I could not stop seeing it. I stepped away from the counter and moved toward the side of the store where the window wrapped around, giving a slightly different angle on the lot. From there, I could see more of the area beyond Pump 3, including the start of the tree line. The glass still reflected the inside lights, but the angle cut some of it down. I leaned closer, narrowing my eyes, trying to adjust to the darker contrast outside. For a second, everything looked still. Then something shifted. Not a full movement, not enough to track, just a subtle change in the way the shadow sat against the ground. I straightened up immediately, my head turning back toward the monitor without thinking. The alert had already come in. I rewound it again, slower this time, taking it frame by frame. The shape was clearer now, not because it had stepped further in, but because I was looking at it differently. I could see the outline of a shoulder, angled slightly forward. The hint of a head just beyond it. And the way it moved was careful, controlled, like someone measuring their distance against an invisible line. I felt my grip tighten on the edge of the counter as I watched it repeat. In. Pause. Out. Always stopping at the exact same point. Always staying just far enough that the camera never captured a full image. I looked back at the window again, slower this time, letting my eyes adjust instead of forcing them. The light outside flickered faintly as one of the overhead fixtures buzzed. The shadow line shifted with it, just slightly. And for a brief second, I thought I saw a silhouette separate from the darkness. It was not clear enough to describe, but it was there, standing just beyond where the light fully reached. I did not move. I did not step closer. I just watched. The seconds stretched longer than they should have, each one dragging as I waited for something else to happen. Another alert chimed. I did not turn away this time. I kept my eyes on the window. If it was really there, I should see it move when the system triggered. Nothing happened. The space stayed still. Then I turned back to the monitor and scrubbed the footage. The movement had already happened. Again, just before I looked. I felt something shift in my understanding then, something small but important. It was not just that I was missing it. It was that I was being made to miss it. The timing was too consistent. The delay too exact. Every time I checked the window first, the movement happened on the camera before I turned back. Every time I watched the screen first, it was already gone. I looked at the system log again, scanning the timestamps more carefully. The alerts were not random. They were spaced just enough apart to keep me reacting, to keep me switching my attention between the screen and the glass. I felt a slow, steady tension build in my chest as that realization settled in. I was not just observing something outside. I was being guided. I turned off the auto switch on the camera system so all 4 exterior feeds stayed visible at once. I wanted to control what I was looking at, not let the alerts decide for me. The screens held steady, each one showing its own slice of the lot. Pump 1. Pump 2. Pump 3. Pump 4. All empty. I watched them all at once, letting my eyes move between them slowly, trying to catch any movement in real time. The alert chimed again, but this time the screens did not change. The notification blinked in the corner, but the feed stayed fixed. And that was when I saw it. Not in the main focus of the camera, but right at the edge of the Pump 3 feed. A shape moved sideways, hugging that same invisible boundary. It was clearer now without the forced switch. The movement was deliberate, almost cautious, like whoever it was knew exactly where the camera's vision ended. I leaned closer, my face inches from the screen. The shape paused, just barely inside that edge, then shifted back out again. I felt a chill run down my arms. Because now there was no delay. No missed timing. I had seen it happen exactly when it happened. And it confirmed something I had been trying not to think about. They were not just avoiding the camera. They were staying where they could still see me. I glanced up at the reflection in the window again, then back to the screen. The two did not line up. The camera showed movement I could not fully see outside, and the window showed a darkness that felt occupied even when it looked empty. I stepped back slowly, creating a little more distance between myself and the glass, as if that would change anything. The alert chimed again, softer this time under the steady hum of the lights. I did not move right away. I just stood there, watching the edge of that frame, waiting for the next movement. Because at that point, it was no longer a question of whether someone was out there. It was a question of how long they had been standing just outside the place where I could see them. I tried to come up with a reason that made sense. Something simple. Something that would let me go back to treating this like a normal shift instead of whatever it had turned into. I told myself it was just a blind spot in the lighting. That the camera sensor was picking up movement from something outside the frame and I was overthinking it because it kept happening. I even said it out loud under my breath, just to hear it sound normal. It is just the light. But the moment I said it, another alert chimed, cutting right through that explanation like it had been waiting for me to try it. I did not move right away. I stayed where I was, staring at the screens without rewinding, without checking the window. I wanted to break the pattern. I wanted to see if it would still happen if I did not react. A few seconds passed. Then another alert. Same camera. Same spot. I exhaled slowly and finally scrubbed back through the footage. The movement was there again, but this time it looked slightly closer to the edge than before. Not enough to fully step into frame, but enough that the outline felt heavier. More present. I leaned in, watching it repeat. The shape shifted in a way that made it clear it was not just pacing. It was adjusting. Testing distance. I shook my head slightly, trying to push that thought away. There had to be another explanation. Maybe someone had parked just out of view and was walking around their car. Maybe they were trying to stay in the darker area to avoid the light. That was normal. People did that sometimes late at night. They did not always pull right up to the pump. They parked off to the side. I turned back to the window again, scanning the edges of the lot more carefully this time. No car. No headlights. No silhouette of anything large enough to hide behind. Just the same open stretch of concrete fading into the tree line. I stepped back and looked at the monitor again. Another alert had come in while I was checking outside. I rewound it. Same motion. Same in and out. But now there was something else. A slight pause before it moved back. Like whoever it was had lingered for just a fraction longer than before. I felt my jaw tighten. I forced myself to look at the system log again, scrolling further back this time, beyond the alerts I had already noticed. I wanted to see if this had been happening earlier, before I realized it. The timestamp stretched back through the night, but there were no alerts before 1:17 a.m. Nothing. The system had been quiet for hours. Which meant whatever was out there had either arrived right then or had been there without triggering anything until that exact moment. I stared at that first timestamp longer than I should have. 1:17 a.m. I tried to remember what I had been doing then. I had been on my phone. Looking down. Not paying attention. The thought settled in slowly. If something had walked into the lot while I was not looking, I would not have seen it. I would have only known once the alert started. And by then, it was already positioned exactly where it needed to be. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the tension there, and forced myself to move again. Standing still was making it worse. I walked to the side of the counter where the small control panel for the exterior lights was mounted. There was a switch that boosted the brightness on the outer fixtures, something we only used if a truck needed extra visibility. I flipped it. Outside, the lights flared brighter, washing the pumps in a harsher white. The shadow line pulled back slightly, shrinking the darker edge where the movement had been happening. I watched the monitor closely as the light adjusted. For a moment, everything looked clearer. More defined. The kind of visibility that should have removed any doubt about what was out there. I waited. No alert. 5 seconds. 10. Then the chime sounded again. I felt my stomach drop slightly as I turned to the screen. The feed showed the brighter lot, the reduced shadow, the same empty space. I rewound it. The movement was still there. Just closer now. The shape had shifted inward with the light, staying right at the new edge where visibility dropped off. It had adjusted. The realization hit harder than anything before it. It was not reacting randomly. It was maintaining position relative to the camera and the light. I stared at the screen, my hands resting flat on the counter again without me noticing when I had put them there. Another alert. Then another. Each one the same. Each one showing the controlled movement along that invisible boundary. I felt the explanation I had been holding on to slip away completely. This was not a glitch. It was not a trick of the light. It was not someone casually standing outside. Whoever it was knew exactly where they could stand to stay out of view. And they were choosing to stay there. I glanced back at the window again, slower this time, almost expecting to see something standing there now that the lights were brighter. The glass reflected more of the inside again because of the increased brightness, making it even harder to see out. I shifted my angle, trying to cut through the reflection. For a second, I thought I saw movement again, just beyond the clearer edge of the light. But it was gone before I could focus on it. I turned back to the monitor. Another alert. I did not rewind it right away. I just watched the live feed, letting the silence of the store press in around me. The hum of the lights felt louder. The air felt still. I realized then that I had not heard a single car pass in several minutes. The road outside had gone completely quiet. It felt like everything had narrowed down to just the store, the cameras, and that one spot at the edge of the frame. I finally scrubbed back through the footage again, slower than before. The shape was there, just like the others. But this time, as it moved in and out, I noticed something I had missed. The angle of the movement lined up exactly with the front of the store. Not random. Not wandering. Facing directly toward where I was standing. I leaned back slowly, my eyes still locked on the screen. Because at that point, there was nothing left to explain away. The movement was not just happening near the camera. It was happening in relation to me. I did not like that thought, so I tried to ignore it. I told myself it only looked like it was facing the store because of the camera angle, because everything out there pointed toward the building in some way. The pumps, the lines on the concrete, even the shadows all pulled inward. It did not mean anything. It could not mean anything. But the moment I tried to settle on that, another alert chimed, and this time it came with something different. The small system notification in the corner did not just say motion detected. It flashed a second line beneath it. A system message I had never seen before during a shift. Manual input detected. I frowned immediately, leaning closer to the screen. There was no keyboard connected to the system out on the lot. The cameras were fixed. There was no way for someone outside to interact with it. I moved the cursor and clicked into the alert log, scrolling down to the newest entry. The message was there again, time-stamped exactly at the moment of the last alert. Manual input detected. My fingers hovered over the mouse for a second as I tried to think of a reason that would make sense. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe the software updated or reset something in the background. But even as I thought that, another alert chimed, cutting that explanation off. Motion detected. Pump 3. And again, beneath it, that same second line. Manual input detected. I felt that cold awareness settle deeper, sharper now. I glanced around the store again, slower this time, checking every corner, every reflection. Nothing inside had changed. The aisles were still empty. The door was still locked. The only sound was the low hum of the building and the faint buzz from the lights outside. I turned back to the monitor and rewound the footage from that last alert. The movement was there again, just like before. In. Pause. Out. But now, as I watched it, something about the timing felt different. Not just the spacing between alerts, but the way the movement lined up with when I was looking at the screen. I dragged the playback back further, watching several alerts in sequence. Each one happened just as my attention shifted. When I looked at the window, the movement appeared on the camera. When I focused on the camera, it disappeared. It was not random. It was reacting. I sat back slightly, my eyes still locked on the monitor, and did something I had not tried yet. I kept my gaze fixed on the Pump 3 feed and did not move at all. I did not look at the window. I did not check the other cameras. I just watched that one edge, waiting. A few seconds passed. Then 10. Then 15. No alert. No movement. The feed stayed completely still. I felt my breathing slow a little, just enough to notice it. Maybe it really was just a pattern I had built in my head. Maybe it only seemed connected because I kept reacting to it. Then, without any warning, the alert chimed again. But this time, it did not line up with anything I had done. I had not moved. I had not looked away. The feed did not change. It stayed on Pump 3. And for the first time, I saw it happen live without any delay at all. The shape stepped just barely into the edge of the frame. Not enough to fully show, but enough that I could see the outline clearly. A shoulder. The side of a head. Facing directly toward the store. It stayed there for a fraction of a second longer than before, almost like it was holding position. Then it stepped back out. I did not rewind it. I did not need to. I had seen it. Exactly when it happened. My hand tightened on the edge of the counter, my fingers pressing into the surface. Because that was not a system delay. That was not a glitch. That was someone choosing when to be seen. Another alert followed almost immediately. Then another. The timing shifted again, faster now, like whoever was out there had realized I was watching differently. The movements became more frequent, but still controlled. Always stopping at that same invisible line. Always facing inward. I felt something change in the air around me, not physically, but in the way the space felt. The store no longer felt separate from the outside. The glass did not feel like a barrier. It felt like a thin line between two spaces that were now connected. I glanced toward the door again, my eyes lingering on the handle for a second longer than before. It was still locked. The deadbolt still turned. But that did not feel as solid as it had earlier. I turned back to the monitor just as another alert appeared. Motion detected. Pump 3. Manual input detected. The words sat there on the screen, blinking softly. I stared at them, my mind trying to piece together what that could mean. Manual input required some kind of system interaction. Something that told the camera to register more than just passive motion. And the only system controls were inside the store. I looked down at the keyboard near the register. Then back at the monitor. Then slowly around the room again. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed. But the message was still there. I felt a slow, steady realization settle in. If the system was registering manual input, and I was not the one doing it, then something else was interacting with it. Not outside. Inside. I turned my head just slightly, my eyes moving across the reflection in the glass of the front windows. The store behind me stretched out in that faint mirrored image, the aisles, the shelves, the back hallway leading to the storage room. For a second, everything looked the same. Then I noticed something small. A shift in the reflection that did not match where I was standing. I froze, my eyes locked on that spot. It was faint. Subtle. But it was there. A darker shape just beyond the line of the aisles. Not moving quickly. Not stepping forward. Just present. I did not turn around. I did not move at all. I just stood there, staring at the reflection, feeling that cold awareness tighten into something sharper. Because the alerts outside had not stopped. The movement at the edge of the camera was still happening. And now there was something inside that I had not seen before. I kept my eyes on the reflection and did not turn around. My body locked in place like moving too quickly would confirm something I was not ready to face. The shape in the glass did not move the way a person normally would. It did not shift weight or adjust stance. It just stayed there, slightly darker than the shelves behind it, positioned just far enough back that the low light from the aisle did not fully define it. I could still hear the alerts chiming from the monitor behind me, one after another, steady and controlled, like a metronome keeping time. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Over and over. But I did not look at the screen. I kept my attention on that reflection because something about it felt more immediate, more real than whatever the camera was showing outside. I tried to slow my breathing, but it did not help much. Every small sound inside the store started to feel sharper. The hum of the refrigerators. The faint click of the coffee machine resetting. Even the slight creak from the ceiling as the building settled. All of it felt louder now that I was not moving. I told myself to turn around. To just check. To confirm that it was nothing. But the longer I waited, the more it felt like if I turned too quickly, I would catch it doing something I was not supposed to see. Another alert chimed. Louder this time, or maybe it just cut through everything else. I flinched slightly, my eyes flicking for a split second toward the monitor behind me. And in that moment, the reflection shifted. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough that I could tell it had changed position. My focus snapped back to the glass immediately. The shape was still there, but now it looked closer to the end of the aisle. Not stepping into the open, but adjusting. Like it had taken advantage of the second I looked away. My hand slid slowly across the counter until my fingers touched the edge of the register. I did not grab anything. I just needed something solid to ground me. The alerts outside kept coming, one after another, but they felt distant now, like they were happening in a separate layer of the same space. I realized something then that made everything feel tighter. The timing between the outside alerts and the movement inside did not line up randomly. When the alerts sped up, the reflection inside shifted more frequently. When the alerts slowed, the shape inside held still longer. It was connected. I did not understand how, but it was connected. I forced myself to move then, but not the way my instinct wanted. I did not spin around. I did not step back quickly. I moved slowly, deliberately, shifting my weight just enough to change the angle of the reflection without fully turning. The glass adjusted what I could see by just a fraction. The aisle came into view a little more clearly. And for a brief second, I thought I could make out the outline of a shoulder near the end of the shelf. Not clear. Not detailed. But positioned at a height that did not match anything in the store. I froze again. The alerts chimed faster now, overlapping slightly, the system log in the corner of the screen filling with repeated entries. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Motion detected. Manual input detected. I could feel the rhythm of it, even without looking. Like it was pushing me to react, to turn, to break whatever control I still had over how I was processing this. I tightened my grip on the counter slightly and forced myself to keep moving slowly instead. Another small shift in my stance. Another change in the reflection. The shape inside did not step forward. It did not rush. It adjusted again, just enough to stay out of a direct line of sight. The same way the movement outside stayed at the edge of the camera. The same careful control. My mind tried to find a way to separate the two. To tell myself they were different. That whatever was happening outside had nothing to do with what I was seeing inside. But the pattern was too similar. Too precise. I swallowed and let my eyes drift just slightly toward the back hallway in the reflection. The dark opening behind the aisles. The place where the storage room and the employee area were. For a second, it looked empty. Then something in that darkness shifted, not forward, not back, just a subtle change in how the shadow sat in the doorway. I felt my chest tighten again. Because that meant it was not just at the end of the aisle. It was moving deeper into the store without stepping into the light. Another alert chimed. Louder. Closer together. The outside movement was accelerating again. I could hear the faint buzz of the lights outside fluctuating slightly as the system kept triggering. I realized then that I had not checked the door in several minutes. I glanced down quickly, just for a second. The lock was still in place. The deadbolt still turned. No movement at the handle. When I looked back up at the reflection, the shape inside had shifted again. Closer to the edge of the aisle now. Still not stepping out. Still just beyond where I could fully see it. I felt something change in the way I was thinking then. It was no longer about figuring out what it was. It was about understanding the space it was choosing to stay in. Outside, it stayed just beyond the camera. Inside, it stayed just beyond the light. Always in that in-between area where it could observe without being fully seen. The alerts outside hit again, rapid now, almost continuous. The system log was filling faster than I could read it. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Over and over. I did not look at the screen. I kept my eyes on the reflection, on that edge of the aisle where the shape kept adjusting. And then, for the first time since I noticed it, the movement inside stopped completely. No shift. No adjustment. It held still. I felt my breathing slow again, not because I was calming down, but because I was waiting. The silence inside the store felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on everything. Even the alerts outside seemed to pause for a second. Just 1 second. And in that gap, I realized something that made the back of my neck tighten. It was not just avoiding being seen. It was waiting for me to make the next move. The stillness did not last long enough to feel like relief. It felt like a held breath that I was not allowed to release. I stayed exactly where I was, my hand still resting against the counter, my eyes locked on the reflection at the edge of the aisle. The shape had stopped moving, but that did not make it feel gone. It made it feel focused. Like whatever it was had shifted from testing to watching. The silence inside the store stretched in a way that made every second feel longer than it should have been. Then the lights flickered. Not fully off. Just a quick dip in brightness, like the power had been pulled for a fraction of a second and then restored. The reflection in the glass jumped with it, the shadows shifting just enough to blur the edges of everything. My eyes adjusted quickly, scanning the same spot again. The shape was still there. But now it looked slightly closer. Not by much. Maybe a step. Maybe less. I could not tell if it had moved during the flicker or if the change in light had just made it appear that way. Another alert chimed from the monitor behind me. Then another. This time they came faster, almost overlapping, the sound no longer spaced out but layered. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Motion detected. Manual input detected. The rhythm that had been steady before was gone. It was accelerating. I felt something tighten in my chest again as I realized that the outside movement had not stopped. It had only paused for that brief moment. Now it was happening faster than before. I turned my head slightly, just enough to bring the edge of the monitor into my peripheral vision without fully looking away from the reflection. The screen flickered between alerts, the corner of the interface filling with notifications faster than I could read them. The system was being triggered repeatedly, almost continuously. I looked back at the reflection fully. The shape inside had shifted again. Closer now. Still not stepping into the open. Still staying just within that narrow strip where the aisle light faded into shadow. But it was no longer at the far end. It was halfway down. I felt my fingers press harder into the counter without realizing it. The air in the store felt different now, heavier, like the space had shrunk without anything physically changing. I tried to think of what to do next, but every option felt wrong. Turning around too quickly felt like giving something away. Standing still felt like waiting for it to close the distance on its own. Another flicker of the lights. This time longer. Maybe half a second. Enough that the store dimmed noticeably before coming back. The hum of the refrigerator stuttered slightly, then stabilized. The camera alerts did not stop. If anything, they grew louder in the brief dip in sound. I felt a sharp awareness settle in. The power fluctuation had not affected the system outside. It was still running. Still detecting movement. Still registering input. I glanced toward the door again, quick this time. Still locked. Still closed. No movement at the handle. When I looked back at the reflection, the shape had moved again. Closer. Now just one aisle away from the open space near the register. Still not stepping out. Still holding to that edge. I could see more of it now, not clearly, but enough to understand its position. The height was wrong for any shelf or fixture. The angle was wrong for any shadow cast by the lights. It was standing there. Watching. Another alert chimed, sharper than the others. The sound cut through everything else, and for a split second, my attention snapped back to the monitor. The feed on the screen showed the outside lot again, the same camera, the same edge. But this time, something was different. The shape outside had stepped slightly further in than before. Not fully visible, but enough that I could see more of it. The outline of a torso. The tilt of a head. Facing directly toward the store. I froze, my eyes locked on that frame. Then it stepped back out again. I did not rewind it. I did not need to. I had seen it clearly enough. I turned my head back toward the reflection immediately. The shape inside had not moved while I looked at the screen. It had held position. Waiting. The connection between the two became impossible to ignore. When one moved, the other adjusted. When one paused, the other held. They were not separate. They were coordinated. I felt my breathing slow again, not from calm, but from the need to control it. Every movement I made felt like it mattered now. Every glance, every shift in stance. I forced myself to take a small step backward, just enough to change my position relative to the reflection. The angle shifted slightly. The aisle opened up a little more in the glass. And for the first time, I saw a clearer outline. Not detailed. Not enough to describe features. But enough to confirm shape. Shoulders. Head. Standing at an angle that kept it just out of direct light. It did not move when I stepped back. It did not react immediately. It just stayed there, holding that same position. The alerts outside surged again, faster than before, the system log filling rapidly. The sound blended into a continuous tone instead of separate chimes. I felt a sharp realization settle in as I stood there, watching both spaces at once, the outside through the monitor and the inside through the reflection. It was not just that they were connected. It was that they were controlling how I divided my attention. Every time I looked one way, something happened in the other. Every time I shifted focus, something adjusted. I was not just watching them. They were guiding where I looked. Another flicker of the lights. Longer this time. The store dimmed enough that the reflection deepened, the shadows thickening along the aisle. When the lights came back, the shape inside was closer. Not by a full step. Just enough that the distance between it and the open space had shortened. I felt my grip tighten again, my fingers pressing into the counter edge. Because at that point, there was no doubt left. It was moving when I could not see it. And it was getting closer each time. I realized I could not keep reacting the same way. The pattern was too clear now. Every time I looked away, something moved. Every time I split my attention, it closed the distance just a little more. Standing there, frozen between the monitor and the reflection, was exactly what it needed me to do. So I forced myself to stop. Completely. I kept my eyes on the reflection in the glass and did not look back at the monitor, no matter how loud the alerts became. The sound had turned into a constant stream now, no longer separate chimes but a continuous tone layered over the hum of the building. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Over and over, too fast to count. I ignored it. I focused on the shape inside. It was closer now, just at the edge of the last aisle before the open space near the register. Still not stepping into the light. Still holding that exact boundary where it could see me without being fully seen. I felt my breathing settle into something slower, more controlled. Not calm, but deliberate. If it was reacting to me, then I needed to stop giving it anything to react to. I stayed still. The seconds stretched. 10. 20. 30. The alerts outside continued without change, but the shape inside did not move. It held position, like it was waiting for me to break first. My hand slid slowly along the counter, inch by inch, until I reached the edge of the register drawer. I did not open it. I just let my fingers rest there, grounding myself again. My eyes never left the reflection. Another flicker of the lights. This time longer than before, almost a full second. The store dimmed, the reflection deepening into a darker surface. When the lights came back, the shape inside had not moved. It was still there, exactly where it had been before the flicker. That confirmed it. It was not just moving when I looked away. It was choosing when to move based on what I did. I swallowed and made the next decision slowly, carefully. Instead of turning around, instead of checking the monitor, I took one small step backward. Just one. Enough to change the angle of the reflection again. The open space behind the counter shifted slightly in the glass. The shape inside did not react immediately. It stayed where it was. I took another step back. The distance between me and the front counter increased, and with it, the reflection showed. More of the aisle. The shape remained at the edge. Still not entering the light. Still holding that same line. The alerts outside continued, but something about their rhythm changed. They slowed slightly. Not stopping, but no longer accelerating. I kept my eyes fixed forward and took another step back. Now I was closer to the middle of the store, no longer right up against the counter. The reflection adjusted again, showing more of the aisle and less of the front window. The shape inside shifted. Not forward. Not backward. Sideways. Just enough to maintain that same distance from me. I felt the realization settle in fully then. It was not just avoiding the light. It was maintaining a position relative to where I was standing. Matching me. Keeping that same gap. I stopped moving. The shape stopped moving. The alerts outside steadied into a slower pattern, spaced just enough apart to feel intentional again. I did not look at the monitor. I did not check the door. I just stood there, facing the reflection, waiting. Another few seconds passed. Then I did something different. Instead of stepping back again, I stepped sideways. Slowly. Deliberately. One foot, then the other, shifting my position along the length of the counter instead of away from it. The reflection changed in a different way this time, sliding the angle of the aisle across the glass. For a fraction of a second, the shape inside did not adjust quickly enough. It was exposed just a little more than before. Not fully in the light, but enough that I could see the outline more clearly. The head turned slightly. Not toward the camera. Toward me. I felt my chest tighten, but I did not stop moving. I continued that slow sideways step, keeping my eyes locked on the reflection. The shape corrected itself, sliding back into that edge position, but I had already seen enough to confirm it. It was watching me directly. Not just facing the store. Facing me. The alerts outside spiked again, faster now, reacting to the shift in my movement. The monitor behind me flickered with activity, but I ignored it. I took another sideways step. The shape inside moved again, matching me, maintaining that same distance, that same boundary. Always just out of reach of the light. I stopped. The shape stopped. The pattern held. I felt something change in the way the space around me felt then. It was no longer just tension. It was structure. A set of rules that I had not understood before but could now see clearly. It could move when I gave it the chance. It could adjust when I changed position. But it would not step into the light. It would not fully reveal itself. And it would not break that distance unless I did something to force it. The alerts outside continued, but they no longer felt like the main threat. They felt like part of the same system, the same pattern, reinforcing what was happening inside. I glanced down at the floor for just a second, then back up at the reflection. The shape had not moved. It was still there, waiting. The distance between us unchanged. I realized then that I had one advantage left. I knew where it would not go. It would not step into the light. It would not cross that boundary on its own. So I did the only thing that made sense. I stepped forward. Not fast. Not sudden. Just one controlled step toward the aisle. The reflection shifted again. The light reached a little further down the aisle from my new position. And for the first time since I had noticed it, the shape inside moved backward. Not out of panic. Not quickly. But deliberately, retreating just enough to stay in the shadow. I took another step forward. It moved again, keeping that same distance. The pattern reversed. I was no longer the one being closed in on. I was the one pushing the boundary. The alerts outside surged again, louder than before, almost frantic now. Motion detected. Manual input detected. Over and over. But I did not look. I kept my eyes on the reflection and took one more step forward. The shape retreated again, slipping deeper into the darker part of the aisle, toward the back of the store. Still not fully visible. Still avoiding the light. But no longer advancing. I stopped there, holding my position, watching the reflection. Because at that point, I understood something that made everything else fall into place. It had never been trying to get closer without me noticing. It had been waiting for me to let it.